Okay. Thank you again for those wonderful opening statements. The live stream has been cut, so this will just be recorded from this point on. So, okay, we'll go into the rapid fire questions. So these are your yes or no questions. Green is yes, red is no. Do you think it's acceptable to put pineapple on pizza? Excellent. Okay, you can put your cards down. Are you a registered Democrat? Okay, you can put your cards down. Are you a lifelong Democrat? You can put your cards down. Will you commit to joining Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton as a co-sponsor of the Bayard-Rustin Stamp Act? The Bayard-Rustin Stamp Act. Yep, just to put Bayard-Rustin, gay icon Bayard-Rustin on the stamp. Great. Do you have any LGBTQIA plus paid staffers? Okay. And with that, we're going to do our first long form question.
All right, so before we began the forum, I used a randomizer. I put all your names in, and so all the questions will be in random order. I'll call on you as you are next and give you the warm-up person who's next. So let me bring you the first question. So the first question, and maybe you are up, and Gerard, you're on deck. Here you go. What are actions or measures Congress could and should take immediately to help improve the lives of people in CA 30? And what are the possible obstacles to enacting these measures? Maybe?
Thank you so much for that question. Oh, that was loud. So I think first and foremost, in order to materially improve the lives of people in CA 30, we need representation that is corporate free. We need representation that is not afraid to stand up against the establishments and to institute policies of economic equity. I think that the residents, the folks that live in CA 30, the folks that live all across the United States, we're still suffering economically. It is hard to afford groceries. It's hard to afford eggs, milk, things like that. And so we need representatives that will actually institute economic policies that will give us relief. And by those policies, I mean things like universal health care, universal basic income. Importantly, instituting a livable wage. The minimum wage is $7.25. Who can survive on that? Here in District 30, obviously it's different because we have a higher minimum wage in California, but still the minimum wage in California is still not a livable wage. So economic relief policies, and those are only achievable by our Congress members. And so in order to do that, we need to elect corporate-free grassroots candidates that have lived experience, who know what it's like to not be able to afford rents, to be able to afford groceries. I'm one of those candidates.
Thank you, maybe. Gerard.
Testing, yes. Thanks so much for the question. So I actually have a very detailed plan on my website, gerardforca.com, and that I call it the American Dream Plan. And I call it the American Dream because, as others have said, my family came to this country for a second chance, and their American dream was for their son and their daughter to go to school, get educated, and live the kind of life that they couldn't live for themselves, right? And when I thought about the American dream, what it meant for me and for millions of others and many of us in the district, I thought about affordable housing. I've heard a lot about education opportunities for all, making student loans a non-for-profit system. I want to bring back tax credits for first-time homeowners, so that we can promote housing affordability, address the root cause of homelessness. That's a big part of the American dream. I talked a lot about fighting for a clean environment, for safe drinking water. Those are things that people associate with the American dream. And then also fighting for our democracy here at home and around the world. And that includes promoting LGBTQ rights, promoting gender equity, but also fighting for them in Congress. You asked, Renee, how are you going to get it done? Everyone has great ideas. As a former Hill staffer, I know how Washington works. I've got the most Washington experience than anyone on this table. And I know how to dedicate resources federally to bring resources to the district and also be bipartisan when it's time to get things to the finish line.
Next, Mike Fior, and on deck, Laura Friedman.
Thanks very much for the question. One reason Mayor Bass so strongly supports me is because I'm going to be a champion in Washington on what is the #1 issue on the streets of Los Angeles and the region, and that's homelessness. And I'll be very specific about steps that I will take that are realistic to do. First, we need to change rules around mental health. There's a federal rule that limits the feds from reimbursing local jurisdictions when they want to build mental health facilities with more than 16 beds in them. We're seeking a waiver from that rule. There shouldn't be the rule in the first place. We have an outrageous number of veterans who are relegated to living on the street. Mayor Bass told me she was talking to the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. There is a rule that requires veterans to count their veterans' benefits toward their eligibility for housing, rendering them, I think, a choice between one or the other. It's a lousy rule. Only Congress can change it. I'll do that. Next, we need to be changing rules around substance abuse. You know, the federal government, Medicaid, only reimburses for 90 days worth of substance abuse treatment. That needs to change. We need more vouchers for housing, for affordable housing for poor people, especially project-based vouchers that will encourage the creation of affordable housing. And by the way, when it comes to affordable housing more broadly, there are many steps the federal government needs to take because that's a huge issue in this district. One is we need to have more bridge funding for the creation of affordable housing buildings altogether. We need to be taking steps to assure that first-time home buyers have an easier way to get what they need. And renters should have a higher renter's credit on their tax returns so they can stay housed.
Laura Friedman, and on deck, Nick Melvoin.
Thank you. So as someone who's been in the legislature for 7 years and before that spent 8 years as a city council member and mayor, I know how the federal government supports our city and how it often doesn't support our city well enough. And the focus that I've been having in the legislature is on the issues that are the most important for people in our community, and affordable housing and homelessness is way up there at the top of the list. I have authored bills successfully to make sure that our agencies better coordinate when they offer services, to make sure that we remove the kind of barriers to providing the housing that we need in Los Angeles. That's often really controversial locally, but we have to have people that are willing to go out on a limb and take those hard stands. And that's why I'm being supported in this race by Abundant Housing LA and by the pro-housing community, because the first way that we can get people off the streets is by providing a place for them to live. If we don't have a bed for people, they're never going to be able to get the services that they need. We absolutely need to fix Section 8 so that it works for everybody. We need to change the tax code so that it's easier to build affordable housing, and that can be done by the federal government. I have also been the author of the state's last 2 single-payer bills. It's not enough just to support this kind of legislation. We also need people that are willing to, again, go out on a limb and author that kind of legislation. And having fundamental national health care reform is key to providing people economic security, because the fact that we have medical bankruptcies in this country and in this state is an absolute abomination. And then lastly, we need to uplift people who need to be uplifted by doing things like canceling student loan debt. Thank you.
Nick Melvoin, followed by Steve Dunwoody.
Thank you. Well, I think there are things we can do to protect vulnerable members of our community, pass the Equality Act, codify reproductive justice, and do more so that our rights are not at the whim of an increasingly corrupt Supreme Court. And then I think I agree with my colleagues around affordability. We need to expand childcare and universal preschool. I'm proud that at LA Unified, we just undertook the greatest expansion of pre-K in California. Every 4-year-old in LA, including in West Hollywood, has a full day of pre-K at no cost to their parents. We need to increase the minimum wage. At LA Unified, we now actually have the highest minimum wage of any municipality, any public institution in the country, because it's important that we pay people what they're worth. We need to look at housing, looking at federal land, looking at reforming Section 8, looking at things like permitting reform. There are these kind of esoteric things in Washington where there are some bipartisan consensus to get things like money from the Inflation Reduction Act, money from the infrastructure bill into our communities to build and do the important work that we need. And then also, obviously, an issue close to my heart is around education. I would champion the full funding of the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is so important for our community. Look at Title I funding, look at pre-K, and look at career technical education. I think you're going to hear a lot of similarity between ideas of these candidates. candidates. We don't know, we hope with your help too, that we're going to be in a Democratic majority, but we're not sure. And so I think we also have to think about who has the chops and who has the experience to work across lines of difference to get stuff done. On the LA Unified School Board, I have the most pieces of legislation, of policy really, passed with all other members of the board. And I think it's going to be important for the next member of Congress from the 30th District to work with people on both sides of the aisle to actually get things like universal health care
Time.
passed.
Thank you. Steve Dunwoody, followed by Anthony Portantino.
Thank you for your question. From the housing crisis to the conflict in the Middle East and to the climate emergency, we have a long list of issues, and it just seems like there's no end in sight. What we need to do is work to be able to, and what I want to champion is be able to champion economic security for the people of our district who are having a hard time. I'm a renter, I stay in Hollywood. I see firsthand what's happening with the housing crisis. I want to champion universal basic income for everyone. We've had a study that showed that $300 to $500 extra a month would make the difference between someone being unhoused and whether they have a house to live in. And I want to close that gap. Also, we want to work to cancel student debt. I've seen firsthand as an educator what it can do and the impact it's had both as a student and as a teacher. I also want to work to ensure that we are moving towards Medicare for all, making sure that healthcare is a right for every single person. I go to the VA for my healthcare whenever I need to go. I don't have to worry about an expensive copay. I don't have to worry about much cost at all. Every single American deserves to have that right to go in and not have to worry about the cost in order to receive life-saving care. Also, we also need to work towards building up our climate resiliency. We're dealing with a climate emergency right now. We've got to be ready for these changes when they happen. I want to work to get us off of fossil fuels. It is time to leave fossil fuels in the past where they belong, and then also champion our democracy to make sure that we feel safe and free to have our voices heard in every space that is possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dunwoody. Anthony Portantino, followed by Seppi Shine.
Thank you. I think it's a fundamental right that people should be educated, healthy, and housed, right? So we need universal health care. We need to raise the minimum wage. We need to make sure we fully fund education. We get 30 cents on the dollar for our special education students. That's something that the federal government can do immediately, is to make sure that all of our children have the funds and the resources in their schools to succeed. Those are the passions that I brought to the state legislature. Currently, I'm carrying a bill to create a first-time home buyer bond so we can get folks into homes. We need that on a national level. Short-term rental assistance is the single most beneficial thing we can do to keep people from falling into the homeless crisis. We need to expand healthcare coverage for folks who are struggling with behavioral health issues. We can do this. We just need somebody who's done it before, who's committed to do it again, and who's got the ability, as my colleague pointed out, getting things done. Anybody can say anything they want here, but it's who's got things done. How can we make people do better? Who's got that inspiration, that optimism? We have to believe. We're hearing a lot about threats to democracy. They're real, but we have to stand up, and we have to make sure that tomorrow we have a democratic country. We need representatives who can articulate those things. We need to ban assault weapons. Biden's talked about safe storage of weapons. That's my bill I passed for California. We need to make it national.
Time. Thank you. And finally, Seppi Shine.
Thank you. I absolutely agree. We need leaders of the present that have a track record. In my first 2 years on the City Council, I passed over 60 items, many of which are being replicated across the region. As a local elected, I want to take my close proximity to the people and hearing from people and what they're going through every single day since the pandemic in our new world, and create new patterns and systems that work. One of those will be to work with other electeds and have conversations. It doesn't matter if they're Republican, Independents, Democrats are on my side or not. Have conversations about the core of the issues, not just about political things of making other people wrong and myself right. That's not what is going to change things in America. I'll work with other electeds to create the Department of Equity, which will focus on dismantling the systemic barriers that are the root cause of sexism, racism, ableism, and anti-LGBTQ rights. I do believe in Medicare for all. That's going to be a while until we are there, and that's just a reality. However, what we've done in the city of West Hollywood is to create 24/7 behavioral health crisis response units. I want to take that framework that has proven to reduce homelessness and all the social services that we provide in West Hollywood, that proven to the federal government, and have targeted
Time.
funding and these response units created in every city,
Thank
and that
you.
will
Time.
change everything. Thank you.
Okay. At this point, we're headed back over to rapid action questions, so get your cards ready, folks. I'm passing it to Nico Brancolini.
First question, have you ever been a member of a union? Member of a union. Thank you. You can put your cards down. Do you support a $15 federal minimum wage?
At least.
Okay, you can put your cards down. Do you support a $25 federal minimum wage? Okay, you can put your cards down. Do you believe that the Supreme Court was stacked by Mitch McConnell and the GOP when they refused to consider Merrick Garland's appointment and rushed through Amy Coney Barrett's appointment?
Yes. Say that again?
Just put green. Yeah.
Agreed. Okay, you can put your cards down. Do you support expanding the number of justices on the Supreme Court? Okay, you can put your cards down. We have our next long form question.
Thank you, everyone. And in the next order, Nick Melvoin, you'll be first. Maybe a girl will be on deck. Assume following the 2024 election, the Democratic Party holds the White House and has narrow majorities in the House of Representatives and Senate. And the majority will only be able to pass one major bill before the 2026 midterms. What issue or issues would you like this one bill to address, and why?
Great. Well, in this omnibus bill that I would create, I think you'd hear a lot of what was said up here. It would be about affordability. When I look at my generation, the first in a century where our life prospects across the board, from life expectancy, happiness and mental health, housing affordability, job security, good public schools, safety, are you not going to get shot going to your place of worship or to your school? We are the first generation of a century where our life prospects are less promising than our parents' generation. And one of the reasons I'm so committed to these issues of equity and equality are because that's how we codify our rights in the world that we want to create. But also affordability is key when it comes to the ability to, not just live in a safe, secure environment, but as some of my colleagues said, home ownership, building wealth, building intergenerational wealth, particularly for communities that have been left behind. Looking at childcare, we shouldn't just have, free full-day kindergarten, but as soon as you're born, we should have options for your families to drop you off. At LA Unified, we have infant centers, and that also enables particularly women and vulnerable communities to stay in the workforce. We have to think about the cost of goods, which is why I think some of these things like the child care tax credit or the earned income tax credit are important, and I'd want to expand it. And like I think some of us just said, supporting a $25 minimum wage. So this Affordability Act, kind of the America we want for our children bill, would include those elements of making life easier for residents of the 30th.
Thank you. And now, maybe a girl, Goodlow, followed by Laura Friedman.
Thank you. If I'm elected and if Democrats have majorities across the board, the one thing that I would love to see and that I would fight to enact is a bill of economic equity. It was, in thinking about this question, I wanted to say national abortion. But a bill of economic equity would actually include that, because a bill of economic equity would include things like universal health care. It would include things like housing for all and tuition-free college, canceling student debt. I've always firmly believed that if everybody in this nation, regardless of immigration status, was guaranteed health care, housing, and education, This would be a better world for all of us. We would not be struggling to figure out how we're going to be able to afford rents. Housing for all includes public housing. It also includes for renters a national rent control policy. So an economic equity bill would include all of these things that would make this place a better world for all of us. Again, universal health care, housing for all, environmental justice, and making sure that people can survive day to day. People are struggling right now. I hope people are even paying attention to the election because they're paying attention to how they're going to be able to pay their own bills right now. And I hope that they know that there are candidates running, many of them right here in front of you, who are going to guarantee that it's going to be easier moving forward.
Thank you.
Well, since we're doing giant omnibus bills, I would put forward an omnibus civil rights bill that was aimed at constitutional amendments. So we absolutely need a constitutional amendment for reproductive rights and for choice. Clearly that we had thought we had won that right many years ago, we did not, and that's something that needs to be in the Constitution to guarantee access to abortion for all people in this entire nation who need it. Also, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and making sure that everybody has access to the ballot box so that they can elect the people who represent their community without gerrymandering and without interference, keeping people away from voting, and guaranteeing that everybody has national mail-in ballots, motor voter registration, and same-day registration so that everybody has access to vote on their own terms. That is directly related to the strength of our democracy. And to stop the disenfranchisement of entire populations in this country. And lastly, enshrining the right to marriage in the US Constitution. So it's not a huge omnibus, it's 3 issues. It's voting rights, abortion rights, and the right to marriage. But I think those are fundamental civil rights that I had thought once you get civil rights in this country, you continue to enjoy those rights, that we get more equitable, that we start to understand what equity means to our nation. But we see that when that happens, there's pushback, unfortunately, from people who are very entrenched in maintaining older power structures that don't include everybody. So it's got to be something that's in the US Constitution and that is clear for all lawmakers.
Thank you. Anthony Portantino, followed by Steve Dunwoody.
Here's a novel idea. Why don't we put in the Constitution that no one named Trump can ever be president of the United States?
Yeah.
I would start there, then I would go to universal health care. And as I said before, everybody has a right to be educated, housed, and healthy. And if I was going to do an omnibus bill, I would have tackled those 3 issues. I think it is completely appropriate to also codify abortion protection, civil rights, and it's been said by several of us, we never thought we'd be here where our civil rights would be attacked, where children would be marginalized, would be used as political pawns. Actually, we should probably say that Ron DeSantis should never be governor or president either, if we're going to start prohibiting people, because he attacks kids. And so for me, housing, healthcare, education, civil rights all need to be in this first bill that the Democratic majority puts forth, because those are our values. And I'd like to see this bill reflect our values, because I think those are the American values.
Thank you. Steve Dunwoody, followed by Seppi Shine.
Well, yes, like many have already said, putting things together, dealing with all these issues that we're dealing with is really important. I've already mentioned from the housing perspective, getting the federal government engaged in what's happening here. So being a partner and being able to champion a universal basic income housing vouchers, to be able to end discrimination in housing as well. These are things that we can champion that are to introduce, I think, a new approach in the Congress. A lot of this stuff is already sitting in bills. It just needs the will and the votes in order to be able to get it done. The John Lewis Act, and make sure that we're protecting our democracy so our voices and votes can be heard in an environment free of hate and fear. The George Floyd Policing Act, I want to see this bill get passed so that people and our constitutional rights are protected as we walk through the streets, and our public safety is transformed and held paramount. And then also, I want to see making sure that we're protecting the rights and recognition of us and our communities, our families, making sure that we're on equal footing. Our people and citizens in Glendale need this, especially because of all that we've seen happen in the local school board meetings where they've been met with vitriol just for introducing LGBT education. So these are things that I want to work to enshrine and champion for our district, and with your help and support, I know I'll be able to do it. Thank you.
Next. Sorry, got lost. Seppi Shine, followed by Gerard Radovician.
Thank you. I would then introduce the Omnibus New American Dream Act, which would first and foremost put term limits on congressional members as well as term limits on the courts, including the Supreme Court of the United States. Raise the minimum wage to $25 per hour, create the Department of Equity that I spoke about, put funding for 24/7 mobile health crisis response units, reduce barriers to mental health care and access across the board with free clinics across America for all. Reproductive rights and women's rights, of course, changing the Constitution to enshrine the right, and also marriage equality for all of us in our community. Multi-stall gender-neutral bathrooms across America. We did it in the West Hollywood, and I will make sure that happens for our community. Housing is a human right, enshrining that in this bill and making sure that all policies create a housing first policy from the federal government and with funding to all our cities so that housing can be built that is affordable for everyone. And of course, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act as well. And I am a proponent of Medicare for all and doing it in a way that lets our hospital system survive.
I am not a good multitasker. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gerard Radovician, followed by Mike Fior.
Okay, thanks so much, Renee. I love this question because I've been a congressional staffer. I've been in the room when the speaker says we're going to develop an omnibus bill and what are your priorities. I've also been in the room sometimes as the only gay congressional staffer, wishing that there was a gay representative at that table in that final negotiating hour when the omnibus is really coming together. So the reality is all my colleagues here have articulated some really good issues that there are existing champions in Congress for. And I agree with every single one that you've heard. What you haven't heard is someone who is going to push for the Equality Act. Because if there is an omnibus bill and we have a majority, this is our chance to get the equality bill passed in the legislation. Think of how much change that would bring to our communities, to our families, and to all the issues that we're fighting for. So that's what I would do, Renee. And that's what I would expect this community to expect from a representative that is representing one of the most queerest districts in the country. I'm proud to announce that I have the endorsement of Barney Frank. Barney Frank has seen me in action in Washington, has seen me being sometimes the only gay congressional staffer in the room. This is the kind of experience that I would bring to get stuff done for me, for my family, for you, and for the entire congressional district. Thanks.
Thank you. And finally, Mike Fior.
Thanks very much. So the reason to run for office right now, I think the only reason to run, is because we are in this urgent moment when so many huge consequential things are on the line right now. We need to grapple with our climate crisis. Nothing else will matter if we don't. So if I were in Congress, I would push a climate action bill. I never talk about this as climate change. It is an emergency, it's a crisis, and our kids and our grandkids are gonna wonder what the heck we were doing squandering this moment if we don't. We could talk about making our transmission grid work because we're not gonna have enough otherwise to assimilate all the electric cars we need. We can talk about grappling with methane, which is a huge climate problem. We can talk about capturing carbon from the various generations that we have. We have to have very serious, stringent measures in place if we're going to survive. We also have to fundamentally focus on other issues. We talked about our democracy. As I mentioned, I'm the one candidate on this stage who has actually fought authoritarianism and stood up for democracy. And yes, there's the John Lewis Act. There's also the Protect Democracy Act, which is an act promoted by Congressman Schiff to rein in the abuses we saw in the Trump administration. And guns. I mentioned my national leadership on gun violence. Just this week, we saw another devastating school shooting happen. When is enough going to be enough? Assault weapons ban, background checks, red flag laws, school safety protections. I recognize these are disparate areas, but we are in a moment right now when our priorities have to matter, and these are priorities. Thanks very much for the question.
Thank you all for those responses. We're doing our last round of rapid fire questions. So yes or no, get your cards ready. Okay, first one. Do you support federal legalization of recreational marijuana? Okay, you can put your cards down. Do you support Medicare for all or a similar single-payer national healthcare system? Put your cards down. Do you support the Green New Deal? You can put your cards down. Would you support federal legislation to end qualified immunity for police officers? You can put your cards down.
All right, now we've formulated some candidate-specific questions that were based off information you provided in your questionnaire or on your website. First question is for Steve Dunwoody. On your website, you state, "We need an America that works for everyone." What does that statement mean to you, and how will this belief affect or benefit your constituents? And then you have 1 minute to answer.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your question. Yes, my website, I've selected as a motto, we want an America that works for everyone. That means we need an America that puts people more on an equal playing field. We need to make sure that we're bringing things of economic security to people in our districts so we can afford housing, food, a better standard of living. And we need to make sure that we are going after inequality in our system. And that means removing tax loopholes for the richest Americans and largest corporations that have been getting out of paying taxes. And that's unfair, particularly to people who are single income owners and fixed income earners and others who are paying almost a third of their incomes in taxes. So, I'm going to work to be able to champion the level of that playing field. Also, we've got to continue on making sure we're fighting for peace here, but making sure we have an environment that's safe, free of gun violence, and then overseas too, ending the wars and conflict in the Middle East. We've got to make sure we're protecting our democracy, making sure that the things that happened today, January 6th, never happen again. Thank you.
Thank you. And Nick Melvoin, this question's for you. There is a nationwide effort to restrict what teachers can say, which books students have access to, and to whitewash curriculum. If you agree with this statement, what will you do in Congress to limit this overreaching? If you don't agree with this statement, what are the top 3 issues facing our education system?
Thank you. I do agree with the statement, and I'm really proud of the work that LA Unified and that I've done in particular as a mechanism to push back against the attack on teachers and schools and our LGBT community. I was proud to sponsor our legislation or our policy this June for Pride Month, and it was at a time when we were seeing book bans and Don't Say Gay. And what did we do at the LA Unified School Board meeting? We actually read a book. The Book of Big Families, to show how we stand with our community and how some kids are growing up in 2-parent households. Some grow up with a grandparent, some grow up in foster care, some grow up with 2 dads, like my niece and nephew who are living with my brother and brother-in-law. But also to push back against the narrative of this radicalization. Now, schools have always been the front line of our culture wars, going back 100 years to the Scopes trial and whether you can teach evolution. Because the bigots and the reactionaries know that the generation of school children today is going to be the generation of voters tomorrow. And that's why I'm proud to protect our schools and our students and make sure that that next generation of voters are pro-LGBTQ and pro-compassion, pro-inclusive students.
Thank you. And Seppi Shine. As a lesbian immigrant woman of color, you embody the diversity of this district. In your advocacy work and as mayor of West Hollywood, you have taken groundbreaking strides to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. How will you continue this leadership in Congress?
I will share my story personally, vulnerably in Congress, so America can learn what it is like to be a lesbian, LGBTQ person, a woman of color, an Iranian immigrant, a person with a disability, and a woman. I will fight to create the Department of Equity. When I came on the West Hollywood City Council, we created the Social Justice Task Force, which was the first time Black, Indigenous, and other people of color have had a seat at the table in the city of West Hollywood to dismantle systemic racism. There was a lot of pushback. I took on Sheriff Villanueva and the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department in remarkable ways, and I've created a lot of shifts. I will take that experience, what I've done here, and fight for all, and bring representation that is needed, because I have that lived experience, and I will fight, fight, fight for inclusivity in Congress and equity.
Thank you. Next question is for maybe a girl, Pudlo. In 2022, you ran for office. What did you learn is the most important issue to voters, and how will you address that issue if elected?
Thank you for that question. So I ran in 2022. I advanced to the general election. It was the first time that a trans non-binary person has ever advanced to a general election for a seat in US Congress. And I talked to a lot of voters. It's hard running as a queer person, let alone somebody who is a drag queen, let alone somebody who is transgender, because we've never seen somebody like me in Congress. When I talked to people last year, what I realized is that people are people. People care about a variety of different issues. What is important to me might be different than something to you. There are, of course, issues that are collectively important to the district. The big one I would say is homelessness. People want to see people housed for a variety of different reasons. For me, though, it's all about the approach. We have to approach it with compassion, and we have to make sure that we are decriminalizing poverty. I am vehemently against the way that the city of Los Angeles is tackling homelessness in terms of criminalizing it. 4118 needs to be repealed. I would certainly speak against that. Okay, that was quick.
It goes fast. Mike Fuhr, question for you. Politicians are often criticized for running for different offices in consecutive elections. In 2022, you ran for mayor of LA. Now you're running for Congress. Do you believe you are better suited for Congress than for a mayorship? Why or why not?
Thanks very much. You know, public service has been my whole life and my career. And it really stems from my folks, my dad in particular, who was a public school teacher and principal. And he became an educator because he survived the Nazi prisoner of war camp. And he said to me when I was growing up, you got to find the most important work in the world and do it. And for me, that has been serving other people, whether it was running Bedsedic Legal Services, does free legal work for elderly and poor people, to being an elected official. You don't run for office to be in office. You run to accomplish something. I wasn't contemplating at first running for this job, but I was persuaded to do so because the moment demands that we have proven national leadership in the position to succeed Adam Schiff, who has been so important. Running for this job fits neatly with my best attributes: the ability to aspire to big things, to accomplish major achievements, to work with people and listen carefully as you fashion the best idea that we can all agree to, and to make the change we need. Thanks for your question.
Thank you. Now, this next question is for Anthony Portantino. You have discussed a model of political leadership that focuses on consistent, often behind the scenes, community engagement, rather than on photo ops and media attention. Tell us how you have modeled this approach during your years in public service, and how will you show up for us if elected for Congress?
Thank you for the question. And to me, it's not about Twitter. It's about doing the work. It's not about the photo op. It's about getting people to know who you are and what's in your heart and how you can represent them. Many of the issues that I promote come from conversations I have with people in my district. Expanding breast cancer coverage happened in a post office. Creating California's umbilical cord blood collection program happened on a street corner. That's how I approach my job. We got dyslexia screening in the budget last year because the governor wanted to put it in the budget, and they were aghast that I was willing to give up a bill. If you don't need your name on the product, you can get a lot done. If you're willing to let other people have the limelight, you can get things done. That's what I do. I get things done because I'm willing to let other people get the credit. There are I politicians and we politicians. I'm a we politician. I politicians make noise. We politicians get things done.
Thank you very much. And now, Laura Friedman, if you would. Recently, your transportation bill to implement speeding cameras in Los Angeles has been in the news. How does this experience reflect the leadership style you will bring to Washington?
So I've been working on traffic safety for a number of years, going back to my days in the Glendale City Council. It's really important because we have a public health crisis in terms of the number of people that are dying on our streets. And if we care about climate change, which is my bread and butter and my legislative work, we need to get people out of their cars, which means giving them a safe place to be. I introduced this bill 4 years ago. And I've introduced it every single year, but every year we made the bill better. I'm actually glad that we didn't get it through the first time, because we have been working with people who had originally had opposed the bill, with equity groups, with AAA, with all sorts of stakeholders up and down the state of California. And every year we've worked with them and taken their input and written a better and better and better bill. Until this year we had support from equity communities, from communities that were impacted more heavily from traffic violence. From AAA for the very first time, from NHTSA, the National Highway Safety Board, sent a letter to the governor asking them to pass this bill. We work with law enforcement. We work with every single stakeholder to pilot this program. That's the collaborative way that I like to work.
Thank you. And finally, Gerard Rendevosian, you have discussed how the U.S. can use its international influence to push for human rights and equality for LGBTQ people abroad. How would you use your influence over foreign policy in Congress to make the world a better place for LGBTQ people globally?
Thanks so much, Renee, for that question. Yeah, my last job was at the State Department, where I was directly working on and leading the U.S. government response to fight the anti-homosexuality bill that was making its way through the Ugandan parliament. This day and age, there was a bill, believe it or not, that has passed in Uganda that criminalizes people for who they are, for just being gay. That bill passed, and my responsibility was to lead the U.S. government response. What I saw firsthand as a diplomat representing the United States all across Africa through my work is that our moral conscience, what we say, what we do, the bills, and the way we handle our democracy here at home makes a difference in how we engage with communities and countries abroad. So that's the kind of experience that I would bring to be able to promote LGBTQ rights, women's rights, and equity and equality all across the world. I think for foreign policy, there's a lot that the United States can do, but a lot of it comes from being humble about our own challenges here at home. And we could address both those at home and abroad at the same time. Thanks.
Thank you all very much. And next, for our final round of rapid fire questions, raise your green card if you favor the first response, or if you choose the second, raise your red card. So I'm going to give you a choice between two things: red crayons or blue crayons. If you like red crayons, raise your green card. Green card, follow directions.
Blue.
And if you want blue crayons, you raise the red card. That's correct. So the red is number 2, and the green is number 1. And now I'll hand you over to our host, Nico Brancolini, to ask you these important questions.
I want to apologize. I don't think using colors as the example for colored card was the
I thought
right
that was a
move.
question.
So I apologize. It's going to be, I think, what was it? So the first one is just wine or beer. So green wine, red beer. Okay, you can put your cards down. Next is Mac or PC. Green Mac, red PC. Okay, you can put your cards down. Oh, you can put your cards down.
An amendment over here.
Amendment, that's fine, okay. Thankfully, this is, yeah, you can do that still.
Friendly
Still, player or, no, sorry. Vanilla or chocolate? Green vanilla, red chocolate. Okay, you can put your cards down. Last one, poker or blackjack? Green poker, red blackjack. I have to be honest, I'm gay and I wouldn't be able to answer this question with a red or green, so there's that. That was our fun round because we do have our last question, and it is about the sort of number one issue that people have asked us to ask about, and so we really were apprehensive to do this, and we're going to be very respectful in the question, but this is our last question of the day.
All right, everyone. So in prefacing this question, I want you to know that I wanted to pick a question, that we wanted to ask you a question that wasn't just a yes or no, and give you the opportunity to give the nuance that it deserves. So here it goes. With respect to what's happening in Israel and Hamas in Gaza, what do you think we can do to help resolve this conflict? What do you think we can do to resolve this conflict? And we'll ask maybe a girl first.
You're gonna have 90 seconds for your responses for these.
90 seconds.
90 seconds.
So I think first and foremost, most importantly, we need to call for a permanent humanitarian ceasefire. I am very devastated to see what has happened overseas. Unfortunately, the response from Israel has been more than tenfold. I think the relationship between the United States and Israel is such that the United States can really impact the moves of Israel. There have been several Congress people who have already called for a ceasefire. There are several who are kind of teeter-tottering on it and saying, well, there needs to be conditional aid to Israel. Here's the thing, we need to have a permanent ceasefire right now. And I don't want to see another Palestinian bombed. I don't want to see another Israeli bombed. But what we have to do is we have to end the occupation of the Palestinian territories and give Palestinians full dignity and authority to live their lives themselves. And again, we have to call for a ceasefire now. I think that a lot of people say, well, what can the United States do? Well, we can halt aid if they're not going to call for a ceasefire.
Next, Gerard Radivosian.
Oh, okay. Sure, thanks so much. I'm glad I'm going after Maybe because I agree with Maybe 100%. I think her and I are the only ones in this race who have actually called for a ceasefire. My ceasefire declaration was about 10 days after October 7. I don't say that with pride, actually. I'm sad that I had to say that because I also support Israel and Israel's right to defend itself and also fight terror. Hamas has to be eliminated and erased, but I don't support the indiscriminate bombing that we've seen over the last few weeks that have led to over 20,000 people died. I approach this issue with gravity and also from a very personal perspective as well, because I'm Armenian American, and that's what my identity is first and foremost. And as Armenians, we are accustomed, sad to say, of being displaced and of losing our homeland. A month before the ugly attack on October 7, we had an ugly attack on Nagorno-Karabakh, on Artsakh, where 120,000 of my own family members, not direct family members, but Armenians live. And we were ethnically cleansed from our homeland, Renee. Those 120,000 people had to walk 7 days to get to the Armenian border where my husband and I were just the month before. So these issues are very much related for me, and I approach them with the seriousness that it deserves. I've met with Palestinian families, with Israeli families to develop my position. I'm proud to say that I'm the only one here that has received the support from Democrats for Israel and also endorsement from Peace Action, which is a progressive national organization, for my position on ceasefire.
Thank you. Steve Dunwoody, followed by Mike Fior.
Thank you very much. This is an important question. We're seeing it every day in the news in terms of what's taking place and what's happening here. Look, I'm a veteran. I served in Iraq. I don't like war. I don't want to see us continue down that path. I think that every nation, however, has the right to defend itself, has the right to be able to, defend itself against terror in particular. I served in the war over it. What needs to happen here is a ceasefire. There is no other way in which we can begin to do the things that are necessary to bring this conflict to an end. We cannot deliver the humanitarian aid that's needed. We cannot do these other kinds of things until we have a ceasefire for both sides. And I think that we should continue that ceasefire to make sure that we can begin things down the path of some form of rehabilitation right now, because what we're just seeing is so egregious. And it is fanning the flames of anti-Semitism, and it's fanning the flames of Islamophobia. We're seeing this take place every day in our country. We cannot say justice for everyone except for here or in these other places. We're calling for justice for the Armenians who are dealing in the situation in Artsakh. We must be consistent in that when we're talking about Israel and Palestine. We must be able to advocate for in the injustice of those who are taking part in that scenario. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Mike Fior, followed by Nick Melvoin.
Thank you very much for the thoughtful question. I've always been a strong supporter of a two-state solution in the Middle East, where Jews and Palestinians can live in peace, coexist side by side. When Hamas brutally attacked and murdered 1,200 Israelis, defenseless Israelis, engaged in abhorrent sexual violence, and kidnapped kids to senior citizens, it was an atrocity, as though, let's picture, what if a drug cartel took over Baja California and came to this area? It is as though Hamas wiped out the entire city of West Hollywood and most of the city of Beverly Hills and took 6,000 hostages. That's the magnitude of what happened. Israel has a right to defend itself, and Hamas ought not govern in Gaza. Having said that, if I were in Congress right now, I would be pushing Israel to much more precisely target Hamas leadership and to de-escalate dramatically the other attacks that it's engaging in now. I would be pushing to try to find a non-Hamas approach to governing in Gaza. Hamas cannot be allowed to continue to govern there. It poses an existential threat to Israel. And I would be actively promoting a resurgence in that two-state solution process, so that bringing in other Middle Eastern partners, the Saudis were close to collaborating with Israel. That's one of the reasons Iran promoted the idea of those attacks. We should be working regionally to come up with a peaceful solution.
Thank you, Mr. Fior. Nick Melvoin, followed by Laura Friedman.
Thank you. I was in Israel this summer, and I was leading a delegation of educators, given the rise of anti-Semitism in this country. And we met with peace activists in the West Bank, and they have a mantra there. They say, 2 truths, 1 heart. 2 truths, 1 heart. And I think one of the things that we've lost in this conflict, but also more globally in our politics, is the idea to have multiple truths at the same time. One of those truths for me is that Hamas is an evil, genocidal entity that doesn't care about its people. It's anti-LGBT, it's of course anti-Jewish, but it's anti-Palestinian. It needs to be eradicated. Another truth is that Israel right now has the most right-wing, corrupt, racist government. When I was there this summer, I was protesting in the streets to get rid of Netanyahu. Another truth is that too few policymakers are thinking about the day after the war. What happened the day after? They're not thinking about the children on the Israeli side who were kidnapped, or the children who saw their parents killed, or the children in Gaza who are seeing their community wiped out. Those are the children who are having to rebuild this society and do better than we did. So what can the US do? The US can help Israel win the war quickly and justly, and then push for regime change in Gaza, probably with the Palestinian Authority. The US can push for regime change in Israel and work with the people and the activists who are trying to push for a more inclusive democratic government. And then we can push for a 2-state solution for 2 states, for 2 indigenous people, and make sure that we are the policymakers in the generation that finally solve this conflict.
Thank you, time. Laura Friedman.
Thank you. Well, you asked a question about what we can do about this, and I'm gonna divide the we into 2 different we's. One we is the United States, we, and the other we is we as local Democrats. And I think we need to think about these a little separately. First of all, in terms of us as local Democrats, are we willing to as Democrats, find a way to have a dialogue that is respectful and that is about building some kind of consensus so that we don't see this issue divide our party and our community the way that it sometimes has been doing? I think we need to understand the deep place of trauma that the Jewish community and the Palestinian community have been experiencing over the past several months, and the politicization of that has been deeply hurtful to many members of our community. I'm a Jew, I have family in Israel. On my inner campaign team, I have a Palestinian who has lost family members over the last few weeks. This is something that's very personal to a lot of our community members, and there's a lot of feelings, and there's a lot of hurt that's been caused locally by the way the dialogue has at times, I think, spiraled away from a place of empathy and understanding, which to me is the hallmark of what we are as Democrats, and to a place that is, frankly, hurtful to a lot of people. Now, in terms of what the United States should be doing, I agree with a lot of what was said. I still believe in a two-state solution. I believe that we have to have a path where Palestinians have their own homeland, have a place with dignity, and have a future. I think all of that right now is really imperiled by what's happening. I wish I could talk longer. I would like to, because this subject deserves it, but I'm
Another
happy
time.
to dialogue with anyone afterwards.
Thank you. And thank you. Seppi Shine, you're next, followed by Anthony Portantino.
Thank you. So I was born in Iran, and I was 2 when the revolution happened. I am Muslim, and I was 3 when the war happened in Iran. And an extremist terrorist regime took over our country and took away everyone's rights. So I understand the perils of war, the effect of war, and I understand what it feels like to have terrorists take away and brutalize people. Hamas is a terrorist organization that has been funded by the Islamic Republic of Iran. America had a chance to work with Europe to dismantle Iran and did not. And that is what I will push for in Congress, that the Islamic regime is removed once and for all. They are the funders of terrorists, and I do believe that Israel does have the right to defend itself. They absolutely have a right to defend themselves. And I would also push for humanitarian aid to bring both sides to the table. This is personal to me as a Muslim and a woman of color, and it is also fundamentally important to also recognize that what's happening here and the silos we've gotten into has caused a rise in anti-Semitism and a rise in Islamophobia. So we need to bring both sides together, and we can do that, and I will speak to both when I am in Congress.
Thank you very much. Senator Portantino.
Thank you. I'm a Catholic, and one of the basic tenets of Catholicism is that we're all sinners, everybody. And so the idea that there's anybody pure anywhere is a false narrative. We all have flaws. With that, I think, what can the United States do? What should Congress do? What should Biden do? First and foremost, you have to support a democracy. You have to say that we support the state of Israel because it is a democracy. And I think Biden has done that. Second of all, we should be supporting more humanitarian aid and making sure that humanitarian aid gets to the folks who need it most. Third, I think we have to make sure that we safeguard innocent people. Israel has a right to eradicate Hamas. It should be eradicated, but we should not be killing innocent people. And the United States should be making it clear to make sure that we don't do that. Third, as Mr. Malvoin said, the U.S. needs to be positioned for peace. We can't have this every 5 years. Somebody has to be thinking of how the two-state solution gets implemented and how it gets to be safe and peaceful for all involved. And then finally, what the U.S. can do, what leaders can do, is speak out against anti-Semitism. We have not seen a rise of anti-Semitism like we are seeing today. I was listening to a student from a Hillel chapter the other day talking about how people are writing and emailing saying, is it safe to go to that campus?
Sorry, that's time.
All students should be safe on campus. That's what we should do.
Thank you all for those really thoughtful responses. We have concluded the question portion of the program. We're going to do closing statements. Because we are running long on time because of our technical difficulties, we're going to ask that you try to limit it to 30 seconds, but you have up to 30 seconds, but you have up to 45 seconds if needed. We're going to go in the reverse order from opening. So Gerard, you are our beginner.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Stonewall, for bringing all of us together on the same table. Thank you to my colleagues. It's an honor for me to sit here alongside all of you. I think I hope what you've taken away from our answers is that I'm different. I'm Armenian, I'm gay. That's the kind of lived experience that I bring to the issues that we face. Those identities are often in conflict, but as a gay Armenian, I grew up not having role models to look up to, and we still don't have gay Armenian elected officials. I want to change that, and I want to be the kind of role model for others that I haven't had for myself. I believe that representation matters and representation is power, and that's what I'll bring to this ticket, and that's why I'm running. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you so much, Stonewall, and to the organizers and everyone. I've really enjoyed this personally, and just really going to be up here with, candidates in the race. I just want to also say, what this is about everyday people who are living in our district. We need to be able to be champions for them, for economic security, and make sure that people feel they can make it every day and have a better standard of living. Whether it's the housing crisis, we need to make sure that we have folks who are working to make sure people can afford, good housing and be able to afford that as well. As well as champion our democracy. So I want to ask for your support to be able to help build an America that works for everyone, and make sure that we're championing that for just folks here, but also across our country as well. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I was raised by a single mom. I know what it's like to take her last dollar. I know what it's like to lose her house. I know what it's like to have my mom sleep on the couch and give me the bedroom. I deeply care about the issues affecting this district. I deeply care about making sure that people have an education, health care, and an opportunity to succeed. That's why the California Labor Federation has endorsed my campaign. Folks know my values. That's why Glendale Out has endorsed my campaign. 14 of the 16 Glendale elected officials have blessed me with their support. I love the community, and I just want your respect, your consideration, and an opportunity to represent you to the best of my ability. So thank you.
Thank you all for the opportunity. I feel validated in my prediction of alignment, and among this group. And even when there's not, I just want to thank you all, because in that last question, to be able to show how to disagree agreeably and show a civil discourse that is so lost in our politics. So thank you to my colleagues for your public service, and it's a real privilege to be up here with you. Congressman Schiff has built his influence and his power because he's been there for 24 years. And so I think in light of the alignment among this group, the question for Stonewall and for voters of the 30th is, who among us has the potential to be the generational leader for the next generation, both in Washington and here in Los Angeles, to work across lines of difference, to get stuff done for our community. That has been the hallmark of my leadership as a teacher, as an attorney, as a school board member, and I hope to have your support as a club and also as a voter in this election on March 5th. So learn more at nickmelvoin.com, and thank you again.
I'm humbly asking for your endorsement vote. Our district is the largest LGBTQ congressional district in America, and we need an LGBTQ person in this seat with a new vision for the future, and that's me. If we keep electing the same leaders, we end up with the same results that have not worked. I am not a leader of the past. I am a leader of now and a leader of a future that works for all of us. It's time we held our country accountable to its promises. I'm fully committed to advocating for LGBTQ rights, climate justice, social justice, reproductive health and women's rights, fair immigration policies, affordable housing, workers' rights, accessible and quality health care, making sure the Equality Act passes, and equal access and opportunity to a new American dream for every single person. And thank you to Stonewall for holding this forum.
Well, thanks, Stonewall, for all of your activism. I'm proud to be here today. I'm proud that in 2018, I was your legislator of the year. I saw the Barbie movie recently, so I'm not going to be that woman who's too afraid to talk about her own accomplishments. And I'm proud of what I've been able to do as a legislator. And I would associate myself with my track record of accomplishments in terms of housing, public transportation, equity, standing up for civil rights. I'm proud that I was a founding member of the Legislative Progressive Caucus, a body that has endorsed me in this race. I'm proud that I'm being endorsed by the League of Conservation Voters and by every environmental group that I know who has endorsed in this race thus far because of my climate work. I was proud when Politico said that I was one of the very top climate legislators in the state of California, and I want to bring that work and that activism to Washington. Thanks, Stonewall.
Thank you. I'm the only candidate who had the audacity and political courage to run for the seat when it was not previously an open seat or a political opportunity, because I know that CA30 deserves a legitimately progressive and corporate-free candidate who acts through the lens of social justice and human rights. I came in second place out of 9 candidates in 2022 and advanced to the general election where I earned the support of more than 60,000 voters. I hope you will consider voting for a transgender representative who will fight for LGBTQIA rights and the civil, human, and economic rights of all the people in the United States. I'll close by saying this. Out of more than 13,000 people who have ever served in US Congress, there has never been a transgender representative, and that is not representation.
I mentioned earlier the urgency of this moment. Our planet's survival is on the line. Our democracy is on the line. Fundamental rights for women to choose for the LGBTQ+ community are on the line. Progress on homelessness is on the line. I am running to connect the proven national leadership I have displayed on major issues to what matters most here at home. And we discuss those issues. And that's why I'm so proud to be endorsed by Mayor Bass, by multiple members of Congress who know that on the first day following one of the most meaningful legislators in the history of our country, on the first day I can step in and make an impact nationally and here at home. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. So in closing, I'd like to say, you have a, do we have, okay. In closing, I want to thank every single one of you for coming today. I think what we've all learned is that every single one of you has incredible gifts and passion and love for our community, and that you will serve us well. And it'll have to be a tough decision for people to make because you all are pretty amazing people. And I thank you for honoring us with your presence today. Finally, I'd like to thank Nico Brancolini, our political VP, who has had the delightful experience of having to organize all of this. He still has hair on his head. That's a good sign. He hasn't pulled it all out yet. And Sean Kaloji, who couldn't be here with us today, who's in Spain, and Michael Kalorge, our operations vice president, and Ernest Cornish, who's handling our video today, Alana Roche for her beautiful contributions to the questions and to the process, also Jackie Steele, Zakia Wright, Kelsey Bryan Zwick, June Panushkin, Tommy Contreras, Steve Fisher, Steve Rouse, and all of you audience members who are here today. I thank you for being here to support these candidates. It is amazing. We have an embarrassment of wealth here. And finally, a final thank you to Matthew Verne, our sound engineer. If you need sounds for parties or for panel setups like these, he's well equipped to handle all of your needs. So that's the only commercial for today. Let's give our candidates a big round of applause.
Thank you very much.
And thank you from Stonewall.
Steve, thank you.